Owsley County, and I teach 7th and 8th grade middle school. And 2 weeks before school started last year, they asked me if I would do a STEM class. And off the top of my head, I thought of robotics, because a lot of kids really are interested in robots or building stuff. So I went to a summer institute to learn about like programming, computer program like Code Combat Online, and looking at how robots could be incorporated in the classroom. And I came up with kind of a model for this year that involved robotics like Saving Fred, so that they can get the scientific process and kind of get that thinking, because this was going to be a completely student-centered class. What they thought and what they did directed how that class went, and it was an 18-week course. Yes, 18-week course. And we did Code Combat. First week I introduced them after the Saving Fred, we did the cubelets. And if you've never been introduced to the cubelets, they're wonderful. They can actually create little, or program these little cubes to create different things that will move in different ways and behave in different ways, and then they can actually learn how to program their phone on apps to control those. So the kids really got into that. It was wonderful. And then we moved into solar bots, that I thought would be like one of the easier things to start us out with, because these kids had no background in creating or building or designing robots or even reading blueprints. So we did the solar bots and then moved into machines, remote control machines. And then from there, we had like presentations from people in the community that had built big dozers, I mean like 250-pound dozers that they had built from scratch, that went with what our topic was. And they would come to the school and they would show the kids and talk about perseverance, like because there were a lot of issues if you're building something from scratch, getting past those issues and persevering. And then of course we did essays about their experience at the end. And to start that off, we did student surveys, like for motivation, because my whole goal in this was, can these students doing this robotics be motivated in their other classes, especially math, because I'm a math teacher. And then how is that going to affect those activities in other classes, and their grades, and their attendance, and all of that. So going into what we did first was the solar bots, and you can see a couple in the pictures of the little solar bots. There were 14 designs. And then once they investigated those, I let them create unique designs that they come up with. The goal was to look at strengths and weaknesses and then create those unique designs from those strengths or weaknesses. Either adapt the strengths and make them better, or use the weaknesses and make them better, or use the strengths and create a unique design incorporating strengths from other multiple designs. And then you can see that we incorporated rates and ratios, the distance formula with these solar bots, and even graphing those formulas. Some of the other pictures that you can see that students were working on, and you can see right here that I brought in video, if it'll open, of some of the trials where you can see students, when the sun was not working well, we figured out that we could actually use a light, and some of you will be familiar with that, and to test whether or not their adaptations were working. That's actually called a roly-poly, and all it did was roll backwards and barely crawled forward. So I was asking them, was that a good design for the solar race that we were prepping for? And in a moment, I'll show you what that outside solar race looked like. The kids really, really loved this, but let's see. What they did here was they had to actually test how fast their rates or their robots would move, and they had to do certain trials and document that. And then once they did that, then I had them predict how they thought their robot would perform in this race. And then after that, with the results, they graphed it. And I kind of was sneaky with them because I had them all graphed individually in their groups and do like a gallery walk, and they couldn't tell anything from their graphs. And then I'm like, well, what can you do to where we could really compare these graphs and understand what's going on? And they finally figured out putting all of the solar ball graphing on one graph so that they can visually see it all together, so they could look at slope and tell that steepness. And I think here's the race. And they were really excited. I mean, you can really tell how much they got into this. And this was just the beginning. And I have to say that the blueprints to this was awful. And one kid said, I'm going to have to do this 1,000,000 times, because they had to figure out there was a lot of issues with these solar bots, but they persevered. I mean, they really figured it out and got these things working. I didn't think they would. The one on the far is going to win. They were excited. They were so excited, and their predictions panned out. Who they thought, based on what they had done with their rates, that's how it happened. And then after that, we moved into the machines, the remote control machines. And I have to say, they loved the remote control machines. And I had several students ask their parents at Christmas time to order them one. And there were 20 designs with this machine. And we did the same thing that we did with the solar bots, but you can notice that they got to make airplanes, elevators, robotic arms. And in fact, the elevator in itself would go up like 8.29 centimeters, 8.29 seconds in the distance. And the students, every group, and I wouldn't tell them, I said, figure out how to make it go faster. Every group figured out how to re-engineer that to get it to go up in less than 2 seconds. So it was really awesome. And they figured out it was the gears at the top. And then once they changed the gears, they had to redesign the top of the elevator to get it to where the gears actually fit and worked. So it was really, really wonderful. Then we went to the unique designs. And some of these are some of their unique designs that they come up with. One group did a hill climber, and they're doing a trial here to figure out what its rate was. Because every time I had them do a robot, they had to figure out the motion and the speed, and then do like visuals on graph paper, like front, top, sides, to kind of get those geometry math topics in. What were you doing? You can see they're using their phone. Long? Okay. They knew nothing about this remote. Instructions didn't come with it. They had to figure out how to use the remote as well. This thing's really wonderful when I show the presentation. It really blew my mind what it could do. And then there's actually a math conversation with this group, and I put it in that showed that they were really thinking. And both of these students, when they're talking, are correct. But one of them, you couldn't really understand if he understood where he was getting that top number from. And so after the video part was over, he finally figured out, because intuitively he was doing this, but he wasn't really understanding how he got that. Why is that not working? There we go. Every group did this with this math discourse. This is the kind of conversations that was going on.
Split per second, and then get the average of all those, right?
Say that again, because I can't hear you over Hunter.
I'm trying to tailor. So we drove 6 foot, and we got these 3 different times. Okay, so we would try to get it per second, foot per second, right?
Yes.
And then we would add up 3 and divide it by 3, right?
So you took each one of those values and did a unit rate for it?
What I did was I took all 3 of these, and it should be 3.18 right there, and then all you would have to do was divide it by 6. Divide this by 6.
And you can just use 6 foot?
Huh?
You did it 3 times. So what are all the distance of those 3 times?
Right there. And I divide
Is that the distance or is that
That's
time?
the average of all these 3 differences.
We want to get
6
it per
foot.
second.
And then you would just divide it by 6, which would give you per foot.
We want to
Okay.
get it per second.
Amelia is saying that if you do each individual one, get it down to unit rate, and then add them up and divide by 3. You're saying that these are the 3
I got
times.
the average right
At the
there.
time. That's the time.
And then you would divide it by 6.
Would you divide it by 6?
Divide that by 6.
And you can see you can see that was what was going on with some of that. And I don't know why that. Anyway, that's just some of the conversations that was going on. I want to do one more video before I talk about the results of their motivation surveys. And it's a real brief, but my room was small. I had to go to the cafeteria for this class. Right there. This is well, I'll let him talk to you about it.
What's the purpose of your robot?
Our robot is supposed to be swamp monkey and most logs out of the swamp.
Swamp monkey?
Yeah, it has straws around it. Chop down logs and put a fire in the two beds.
That's pretty cool. Did you get that off the swamp loggers? That's where the swamp loggers, they show that here, that show. That looks like one of those machines that, what's his name? Shelby, yes. That's pretty cool. Did you figure out how fast it can go?
So that thing could move 60 inches, 5 foot, in 12 seconds. And he said it actually could move faster backwards.
Do you think one trial was enough?
I guess because it really wouldn't have made much of a difference.
Are you sure about that? How could you test that?
And they did. They went and did it again. The results of this, after we did all of this, they actually wrote an essay. And in that essay, I had them look at these topics: purpose of robots in the real world, what issues they encountered building the robots, and the designs with blueprints, because they had some issues with the blueprints. The machine blueprints were much easier to understand and follow than the solar bots were. That was a big issue with them. And then how did it affect them in the math and the science, the technology, the engineering, and would they recommend this class to future students, and how did it impact their personal life? And amazingly, a lot of students said that it was really impactful, and I have several students that probably it's opening up a whole new thought process for them on making blueprints, because I have one student that was so talented at following those blueprints, she could probably be a person that could actually create blueprints for other people. Survey, 77 of those students believed that it did motivate them in their other classes. That's a huge belief. I mean, if they think something like that is going to motivate them in other classes, that right there in itself could get them motivated in their other classes just because they're more engaged. Percentage of students studying for tests actually went up from the beginning of the school to the end of the 18. Like I said, they were studying. They really were studying more for tests in their other classes. Motivation for giving their best capabilities went from 91% to 100%. Of the students that were surveyed. The only thing that would probably more data so that you could see a trend over the years is the class subjects and the motivations and the outside stuff, because it kind of went up and down a little bit in the survey. Teachers. Motivation of students compared to last year's, 50% thought it was more, and then 25 on less and 25 the same. Grades going up due to the increased motivation, 50% thought that grades went up, 50% didn't think so. And then attendance impact due to increased motivation, 75% of the teachers thought that did impact that. 25% thought maybe, and nobody said that they didn't think that it did. It was really an experience. I enjoyed teaching this class, and I'm hoping that we get to do this again next year. And can't tell you how many parents and students have come up to me saying that my child loves this robots, loves building these. So it's been a very good experience. Thank you.